Morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sustainability Partnerships Sustainability Day of Action. This is our first webinar of the day. We have 3 coming up as it is our flagship day. I'm just going to wait for a little while before we have everyone sort of coming in. We do have a chat function, which people are already saying hello. Can I record this for my podcast? Sure, I've not had that question before. Feel free. It's going to be public information as soon as we record this and it goes live onto our YouTube channel. So, you know, if you want to record it yourself, that's absolutely fine. We have some great speakers today and we will start in a couple of minutes, but just so everyone is aware, there's a chat function to say hello. So if you want to just intro yourself and let us know what you're up to this morning, there is a Q&A function there if you can use that separately for any specific questions to our panelists. That would be really helpful so that I can make sure all the questions are there and they get answered in the session at the end. So a little bit of background, the Sustainability Day of Action has been going for, I think, maybe 8 or 9 years now. We have been running it as Sustainability Partnerships for at least 3 of those years. We did have to move the Day of Action because in June we had a very surprise political event crop up on us, so we had to move it into July, but that's absolutely fine. So I'm happy that we have had quite a few people sign up to our events today. So we do have this webinar first about supply chain within the NHS. The other events that we have coming up today is we have one around sustainability in food alternatives at lunchtime, just to make sure everyone's hungry enough for their lunch. You can still sign up to that one if you're free, and then we do have an event 4 till 5, which is around communications and sustainability. And again, you are able to still sign up for that one if you're free. If you're not free, we encourage you to sign up anyway, and you will be sent the recording. So to intro this event, I'd like to first introduce Stephen Burt, if you would like to come on and intro yourself and let us know who you are and what you're going to be talking about today. Stephen has brought some backup for his case as well, with a bit of a case study. So if you want to let us know what Brooke and the guys are doing here as well, and then I'll let you guys have your little session, and if anyone does have any questions for these guys, again, please put them in the Q&A function and not in the chat, otherwise we might get confused where those are. So thanks so much, and please take it away, Stephen.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm Stephen Burt. I'm the Carbon and Sustainability Services Director with NQA. NQA are a global certification and verification body, but for the purposes of this, we're involved in the external third-party accredited verification of carbon quantification, carbon mitigation, and carbon reporting requirements. So it's essentially around, you know, the verification services is around avoiding marking your own homework when it comes to carbon quantification side of things. Brooke, do you want to say hello as well?
Hiya, so I'm Brooke and this is my colleague Nina, and we're from Richardson Healthcare. We are the sustainability leads there who have worked alongside NQA to get our PAS 2060 verification.
Excellent, good. So I'll just crack on if that's okay for the minute. Hopefully everybody can see my screen, okay. So yeah, as I said, what we're going to have a quick run through is the role of accredited verification services for quantifying your carbon, essentially. So, you know, a lot of companies, including in the NHS supply chains, will quantify their carbon for various reasons, regulatory or supply chain pressures, and also reducing carbon and ultimately reporting those carbon numbers. So we'll do a very quick introduction to myself and my colleague as well. A very quick background to NQA, who we are, what the products and services that we offer are. And then Brooke and Nina, as Brooke said, is one of our clients who NQA have worked with at Richardson Healthcare. So they're providers of wound care products and IV products and procedure packs to the NHS directly. So Brooke will run through a little bit of the detail around a client's perspective and NHS supplier's perspective on the carbon quantification reduction process. So as I mentioned, I'm Stephen Burt. I'm a director here at NQA. I look after all of NQA's carbon and sustainability services, along with my colleague Amber, who's a sustainability assurance manager. So I've been involved in all things carbon, energy, environmental for 25 years or so these days. So loads and loads of experience around that side of things. So NQA, we're what's called a certification and verification body. So we're a global organization these days. We offer certification and verification services against lots of different international standards, so ISO standards. But for the purposes of the carbon verification work that we undertake, there's an international standard for quantifying your carbon, which is ISO 14064-1, and a couple of international standards around carbon neutrality, which is PAS 2060, which Brooke will talk about, and also the new ISO 14068-1 standard. So all of these international standards are aimed at providing a framework for companies to quantify and reduce and report their carbon against. And NQA provide the external third-party accredited verification services against those standards. So as I said, it's about not marking your own homework, it's about credibility and robustness around the carbon numbers that companies are reporting. So just some of our clients, just so you can see, not all of our clients are in the NHS supply chain, but many are. But we work with a very, very wide range of clients in the work that we do. Just to quickly run through a little bit of detail around the carbon standards that we provide verification against. So the top of the pile in terms of credibility for carbon reporting is ISO 14064-1. So this is an international standard. It's focused on the quantification and the reporting of greenhouse gas emissions and removals. So it provides a framework for any business, really, small, medium, large size businesses in any sector, including the NHS supply chains, to provide a framework for that carbon quantification and reduction and reporting process. So NQA provide independent third-party verification services against this particular standard. The reasons companies would adopt this particular standard, it's around supply chain a competitive advantage primarily. So it provides the most robust and credible mechanism that there is to actually quantify your carbon. So it helps with competitive advantage. It also helps with regulatory compliance. It is around demonstrating commitments to net zero as well. But also some industry and supply chain requirements, which you will be very aware of, such as PPN 0621, the policy procurement note for the NHS supply chain around carbon reporting and carbon reduction. So ISO 14064-1 helps with all of those. There's also a couple of standards I get for carbon neutrality, which we offer verification services for. The first one is PAS 2060. This is a relatively old standard now, 2014, but it will be replaced by ISO 14068-1. So there's now a new international standard, part of the transition to net zero standards for ISO. That's focused on carbon neutrality. And these are highly credible standards because they lay out a hierarchy for carbon. You know, first you have to quantify it, and then you must reduce it before you then offset it. And in actual fact, the ISO 14068-1 introduces an additional aspect to that hierarchy, where you need to quantify your carbon, and you should then reduce your carbon, remove, so carbon removals is the next stage in that hierarchy, and then finally to offset. And both these standards set out the requirements for the carbon offsetting mechanisms that are used for carbon neutrality, and they both set out the highest quality carbon offsetting mechanisms. So we'll see ISO 14068-1 take precedence over PAS 2060 later on in 2025. Just a quick word on the training services that we offer as well. So on our website, we have lots of e-learning courses around carbon quantification and also the international standards that I've mentioned. And there's things like lead verifier courses, and there's wider sustainability topics there as well. And lastly, just some of the tools and resources on our website, which might be of interest to you. So we have a sustainability microsite. There's lots and lots of client case studies in there, including in the NHS supply chain and including Richardson Healthcare themselves around the carbon quantification and verification side of things, and lots of blogs and news items and so on that might be of interest as well. So I'll hand over to Brooke, who can take you through Richardson Healthcare's experience of the verification process.
Thanks, Stephen. Give me 2 seconds. Okay.
Hi there. So as Brooke said earlier, we're Richardson Healthcare. We're a medical device company based in Elstree, Hertfordshire. And we specialise in 5 key areas. Some of you may be familiar with our procedure packs, our wound care, our tourniquets. So in 2020, the NHS released or launched its For a Greener NHS plan. So at that point, as a company, we became conscious that as a supplier, we had a corporate responsibility to support the NHS's efforts on its net zero journey. But as an SME, we found the prospect of making big change daunting and something that we weren't really aware of how we were going to begin. So we made a few small changes before 2022. So some of our packaging became FSC certified, but we really began our net zero journey, if you will, in 2020 when we partnered up with NQA for our PAS 2060 certification. So following that, our first major move that we did was release our carbon reduction plan. And as of 2023, we became a carbon neutral company. So how we were able to sort of begin our journey alongside NQA was taking a 3-pronged approach to sustainability. So as you can see on the screen, we've sort of split it up in digestible chunks. So we focused on our products, our planet, and our people. And for every section that we focused on, we aligned it to one of the 17 or 4 of the 17 United Nations SDG goals. So as you can see, key areas that we've focused on: reducing plastic, reducing waste, conserving natural resources, and creating sort of an inclusive environment. And from that point on, we were able to really, with NQA's guidance, make some real changes as to the infrastructure of our company. With that being said, throughout the journey, we encountered some challenges, but through our partnership with NQA, we've sort of been able to remedy or work towards mitigating. So for example, the sustainability tender questions prior to us joining up and really starting our carbon journey, we found quite difficult. The language was very inaccessible. We didn't really understand how we were going to make any real changes. Another issue that we had was we found it quite difficult to identify who sustainability leads were that we were really keen to work with at Trust, although events such as these makes it really, it sort of opens up these doors for us. We also found the prospect of making long-term infrastructural changes or financing them rather quite challenging, but we've realised that actually incremental change is just as powerful, and it, transitioning to a full, say, electric fleet within a day is not necessarily the answer. So NQA's really sort of supported us with that.
So this year for 2023, we become verified for our 2nd year in a row. So on the left, you can see our baseline total emissions for 22, which was 953.5. And then for the reporting year 23, we got 738.34. So we made a reduction of 23% in total. For our second reporting year, we focused heavily on upstream transportation and downstream transportation, because we found that those were our biggest emissions. So for upstream transportation, we accounted for 64% in our first reporting year, but we reduced this by 34% this year, which was done by just reviewing purchase order processes and reducing container shipments. And then these were our targets that we set ourselves for the first year. They were sort of small but achievable targets. So what we've achieved so far is becoming verified for PAS 2060, appointed sustainability leads within the company, reduced our downstream and upstream transportation emissions, updated company travel policies to promote more carbon-friendly travel, improve the end-of-life processes of our products, so incineration, and we're turning that into fuel instead of it going into landfill, and then annually updating our sustainability plan.
So as we recognise that we made some pretty large reductions last year, and that's obviously not going to be realistic to achieve every year. So as Brooke said, we're focusing on smaller, more incremental, but long-term changes. So as you can see with our upcoming projects, we've got a plan to reduce our upstream and downstream transportation by 10%. We've aimed to reduce our electricity use within our head office by 2%. And we're encouraging our employees to volunteer at green spaces and integrating more sustainable practices within our business. As you can see on the left, we've got our long-term goals outside of our current projects that we're working on. So a big one on there is we want to reduce travel by 40% within the next 3 years. We currently have achieved a 5% reduction, but we are looking at sort of instituting a green travel policy that is really looking at targeting our field staff travel, reducing in-person meetings, teams such as these, and also aside from that, ensuring that we really tackle our downstream transportation, which we will be doing using, say, with sort of greener shipping routes within the UK and optimising sort of warehouse locations.
Okay, so as I said, this is our second reporting year that we've become a carbon neutral company, thanks to NQA. So we've done a case study with them as well on our journey. The benefits of PAS 2060 for Richardson Healthcare, as Nina mentioned, is we are an SME. So we were able to get various departments involved when looking at our carbon emissions and which areas we can improve in. And so everyone felt involved in the journey and was motivated to review their own independent processes and how we can reduce our emissions further. And I believe, yeah, that is the end of our slideshow.
Well, thanks, guys. Thanks to Stephen and Brooke and to Nina as well. Sorry, I didn't name check you there before, Nina. I didn't. You went up on the screen, so but I really appreciate you helping us out with that presentation today. I know, Stephen, you were trying to rattle through those slides, and there's loads more detail on what it is that you guys actually do, but it was really, really important to have the guys here from Richardson as well, just to give a real life example of how a real difference you can actually make and what tangible results you're able to show, especially when you're in your second year, guys, because first year is kind of like, here's our first results, but second year you're just like, yeah, now we can do those year on year changes as well. I think that what's really, really great is the fact that, you did talk about how the language is inaccessible, right? And that's just one of the main barriers, I think, for people talking around things about sustainability as well. People are afraid to use certain terminology because they think maybe that's not necessarily the right thing to say in their industry. There's also, it's also great that people like NQA can work with you to break down those barriers to that sort of feeling of inaccessibility, or that we don't have anything to say, or we're not sure what to say, and also apply the thinking around that low-hanging fruit as well. You talk about scope 3 quite a lot there with your people coming to work, and your different thinking around that kind of thing, which then also brings me into how you got everyone involved and how you made sustainability feel like it's everyone's job, which is what's so important both in the private sector and in the NHS. And that's why this afternoon we do have that sustainable communications webinar that's still free to sign up for now, where we talk about how we can break down those barriers of inaccessible terminology and how we can make everyone kind of feel like they are involved in the sustainability narrative. So really appreciate your guys' intros there today. We do have our next presentation from Tushar. Before I intro you, I just want to say there is one hand raised, Adam. If you can put your question in the Q&A function, then we'll be able to come back to all of those questions after the second presentation. And if anyone does have any questions, please put them in that Q&A. If you've got any comments, if you've got any links, if you just want to say hello, use that chat function there as well. Appreciate everyone sort of jumping in and sort of introducing themselves. Love to see who's actually here today and who we're talking to. So please continue to use that, and any comments or anything, please put them in there. So we will move on to you, please, Tushar, and please tell us who you are, what your company is, what you do, and what you're going to be talking to us today about for supply chain.
Thanks so much, Georgia, and thanks for everyone to take our time. As Stephen, Mina, and Brooke alluded to the work around certification, Ecomedic is all about like measuring the emissions and reducing them. So yeah, I used to work in like creating synthetic data sets and replacing that for patient data. So like building 3D models of post-rate and things like that, where you can then train an AI model on top of it. And while working with a lot of medical device companies, what I found out was like everybody's facing this big problem of how they can make their products more sustainable. And in healthcare, you have like emissions that are 2 times the aviation industry and 55% more than the automotive industry. And this is where I started Ecomedic with NLC Health. NLC Health is like a venture studio in Netherlands. And our focus is on scope 3 emissions. So how can we best measure the scope 3 emissions in the most accurate way and then look at ways on reducing them. So I'll just share my screen. So today I'll talk a bit about LCA and how we can do more accurate LCA, as well as I'll show you a product demo as well. How can we make these things slightly more easy? I think some of the images probably you would have already seen, like this is like the waste being generated from a single operation in a hospital. And while looking at like visiting one of the hospitals, I saw that you have like for a single operation, you can have a waste generated equivalent to a size of a small room. When you do, and then there are hundreds of such operations happening on a daily basis. And there are regulations that have come up. So the good news is I feel like while speaking in the hospitals all across the world, that like UK is far ahead in terms of like looking into how to reduce the emissions. In the US, they are still asking what is sustainability. And if you look at the emissions, like we have 3 types of emissions in scope 1, 2, and 3. And scope 3 is the most difficult to measure because it links to the supply chain of the medical companies. So trying to find out like, what the manufacturing process is, what are the transportation systems, and then looking at what are the energy inputs at each of those different processes is slightly a daunting task. And you could measure emissions through 2 ways. One is cost-based approach. So that's where you find most of the companies focusing on, which is like you go to a bar, you order a drink, so they will just multiply the cost of that drink with an emission factor, and that's how you get emissions. But that doesn't work for hospitals because, as we know, the cost continues to rise. There's inflation, and it will always show a rise in emissions. plus you don't get like a micro view on how you can reduce the emissions. So what we do is something called life cycle assessments, which I feel like most of you are already aware of it. But just to be a little bit repetitive, it's the journey of the product, starting from the raw material to the transportation phase, to the use phase, and then like either you're burning it or you're sending it to the landfill. Right now, how the life cycle assessments are done is like you start with, on the left-hand side, you start with something like bill of materials. So you write all the products, what are their weights, and then you try to build an Excel sheet around like, what are the, manufacturing inputs and everything. And then you take it to a software which does the calculation. And then you have to use multiple documents to do it. So this takes months and months of work, somebody's work, to actually build a life cycle assessment. So what we have built is like a software where we are developing our own sort of a data set on different manufacturing processes inside the medical device industry. And and I'll show you the like the database. It looks something like this, where you have, let's say, example of a stoma bag. So stoma bag is made of like 5 different parts, which is like, let's say, a liner, protective film, and everything. And each part has a kind of a manufacturing process, which could be an extrusion, it could be, let's say, blow molding, and it would be made of certain kind of a material. And then all these things are combined by the energy that goes into it, which would be, let's say, kilowatt hours. It could be electric, it could be, let's say, coming through the gas. So at this point, I'll show you a quick demo on how we are doing it, and then I'll move to case study of what we have done for some medical suppliers, which will. So this is what we have built, and like the way you start is like you end up with, let's say, I'm taking a simple product, let's say a protective cap of a bottle, not the whole product. And what all you need to do is basically start asking questions in terms of, let's say, what is the manufacturing process of made of polyethylene, for example. And what it does is it looks at our database. It's not something like you're using a ChatGPT, which does not give you a source of the information. So it's like giving you the exact publication from where you can find the manufacturing process and where you can actually find the energy inputs as well. So it looks at the internal process and gives internal database and gives you a quick summary of what are the, like, let's say, most energy intensive manufacturing process of the of the product. Sometimes takes a bit of time. So once you get the summary, then you can actually look at, okay, there is a molding process involved or injection molding process involved. And then you can actually start building your table in terms of, okay, let me ask a question around, like, let's say, what is the, and then it gives you the source as well. So you can always go back and check, like, the source that is given, is it correct or not? And you can always verify that information. And then, for example, if you ask, like, what is the energy input for injection molding for polyethylene, then it will look at, like, it will also guide you on different kinds of injection molding. So there could be an electric injection molding, there could be hydraulic, and there could be a gas-based. And based on that, you can either take the decision yourself, or it will automatically take the decision and add it into the table. So this is how you could start building the whole life cycle inventory of the product. And once you're happy with, like, all the details that you have captured in the table, all you have to do is just calculate emissions. And then you can choose the process that you're going to use. Recipe is the most common process these days that's being used because it covers from end to end, like cradle to the grave methodology. And then you can use like multiple database like Exiobase, EcoInvent to find the emission factors and decide on like which emission factors you want to take. So this is how the emission factors show up, and then you can choose, like, if the product is coming from China or, let's say, Brazil, so, and then you can choose the emission factor. So right now it was just one product. We didn't look at the transportation, but what we'll do is it just will calculate the emissions for you, and you can have the full sort of a breakdown of where the emissions are coming from different parts of the supply chain. So to show you probably a case study on how we have done this for a mask. So this is like like a P3 mask that's used inside the hospitals. And obviously, while like measuring emissions, we always want to compare it with a, let's say, a single-use mask and a multiple-use mask, basically. So this is something that you can reuse. So you could like clean it and then sterilize it through UVC. So the same thing we do is we look at like all the materials of the products, what are the, let's say, the weight of each component. And then we look at the entire supply chain, where exactly the raw material is coming from, what is the use phase. So use phase involves, let's say, cleaning and sterilization, and then most of these devices are incinerated. And once we look at the supply chain, then even if you look at like, let's say, polypropylene inside a product, they cannot be used as a standalone item. There is always something that is added into the mixture. So it could be benzene oil and other sort of crude oil additives that are added to manufacture the product. So we look into all that and then build the like emissions for the product. So this is like the emissions that are coming from different parts of the supply chain. So how much is manufacturing contributing into it and how much is raw material contributing to it. And then we are comparing it with a single-use mask. So we are looking at like, okay, if the single-use mask, let's say from another company, like how much emissions are we seeing from a single-use compared to, let's say, a P3 mask. And we see like, if we are using UVC sterilization, so it's always a part of a process. So if you looked at like, let's say, autoclaving sort of a process, which is like a steam-based sterilization, then the difference would not be that big. But if you change the process from autoclaving to, let's say, UVC sterilization, then you will see considerable savings in the emissions. And in terms of cost, what we saw was like 66 to 83% reduction at a per person level. And then it's about like, how can we reduce the emissions further? So if you look at the product, it was like it had like inhalation filters and exhalation filters. And what they're looking at right now is like, can they, like the exhalation filters, which are daily use, so you're using it and then throwing it, can they be converted to a monthly use filter? And that would like lead to further reduction in the carbon emissions. So over the lifespan of, I would say like over the lifespan of 5 years of the mask, you're looking at like 336 kilograms of savings at a mask level, provided you're using UVC sterilization and not an autoclaving process to clean the products. Similarly, just rounding up, this is like we did for like bioplastics. It's on top of everybody's mind. Like everybody wants to see like how bioplastics can really help in reducing the emissions. So this is like a speculum that's used in the gynecology department. And the comparison ideally is with a stainless steel one, which goes through an autoclaving process. So once again, it's like the cradle to the grave, looking at the entire sort of and it's a sugarcane based plastic. So like sugarcane, you create granules using sugarcane. It's like a detailed sort of a manufacturing process on how you build it. But in this study, it's done a bit differently because you break down the manufacturing process into like, let's say, growing a sugarcane, for example, and then like, like extracting sugar from it and then creating a polylactic acid from it. So once you look at like the whole thing, what we look at is like the emissions are definitely low, even though the product needs to go through waste incineration at the end of it. And if you look at it like a process level, which is like starting from a sugar cane to like waste incineration, you can also analyze it at a level like what happens at each part of the manufacturing process, where are the emissions coming from, and how you can then actually focus on reducing those emissions. So yeah, in summary, this is what we do, which is like help measure the emissions and then look at how we can reduce the emissions in the short term as well as in the long term. And thanks so much for your time.
Thanks so much for the intro and to the demo there as well. I think that first of all, I love that image at the beginning with the patient and all of the plastics and utensils and all the things that are involved in just one operation. I've seen images like that before, but not quite like that one. I'm not sure where you got that one from, but it is quite stark, isn't it? And I also love the whole cradle to grave piece, right? Because I think that what you guys are uncovering is the true sort of nature of some of these so-called innovative materials, right? So if you said on the face of it, okay, would you rather a plastic speculum, one made from sugarcane or one made from stainless steel, you know, there would be that that debate around, well, one's single use, one's made of virgin plastic, one's made from something that we perceive to be the most ecological. But then actually, if you go back to the manufacturing process, if you think about things like, well, it's deforestation for the land mass to grow sugarcane, etc. Actually digging a little bit deeper. And what you guys are doing is, you know, not calling out and not saying, oh, don't use things or don't use these things for one or another. It's just saying, let's look at the entire picture of it. Let's look at the genuine truth of the full scale from cradle to grave, and actually look at, you know, what is the most ecological. And sometimes it turns out that the good old stainless steel that just gets rewashed every single time is actually the most eco-friendly. So it's great to see that we are properly, you know, taking it seriously and uncovering the true story behind some of the things that we're using. So really appreciate that. So there are some questions here. I'm going to jump straight into those as well while we're here. So we've got quite a good bit of time left over. So there are some questions. I'm just going to go through and ask. I think this is kind of out to anyone. If anyone wants to jump in, please feel free for this to be a bit of a free-for-all for thoughts and ideas. How does the NHS aim to measure the impact of net zero initiatives on improving accessibility and support for individuals with disabilities within the supply chain? Does anyone have any background or thoughts on this, particularly to do with individuals with disabilities?
No.
Stephen doesn't have any background on that. I don't know that this is necessarily the right audience for that question, in that we don't have a representative from the NHS specifically to answer that. But I think that if anyone who is from a trust that's in our audience today has any thoughts or answers to that, please, you can add them in the chat function there. I think the second one is also to do with asking around the NHS specifically. From Catherine, good to hear that an SME has been able to use a certification to assist them on their carbon reduction plan. What gaps did you find, guys? I think this is for Brooke and Nina. What gaps did you find, and was it easy? What was difficult?
I think originally, when doing our first reporting year, it's sort of the information you need and the sort of different scopes that you look at to know. For example, with waste, with our office bin that we have here, it's just working out how much waste is taken weekly, where is it going to, what's happening with the waste that's there, having like the paperwork from local councils, and then when looking further into like different scopes, like how many containers we have coming over from China, how many sea miles it does, the weight of it. It's just a lot of thought has to go into the process, and for you to be able to put your evidence together to say this is like where we're at.
But wouldn't it also be to then know how to calculate that accurately?
Yeah.
Given the sort of changing sort of scope calculations.
I mean,
with energy, for example.
We use the government conversion factors online, but there's so many different tabs, so many different conversion emissions you can use for average laden. Like there's so many different things that you need to focus on. But I think it's just reassurance as well, when having NQA audit us, to be able to thoroughly check that what we've given is correct.
And did you have any points on that as well, Stephen? Because I had a sort of follow-up that's kind of relevant.
Yeah, I mean, Richardson did a great job of comprehensively quantifying their carbon emissions initially, and do you know what? We're dead lucky in the UK, because the carbon conversion factors that the UK government provide us with are excellent. They're really, really good, very comprehensive. They're updated every year, and in my experience anyway, they're the best in the world. There isn't another country that provides carbon conversion factors to the same degree that the UK government do. So yeah, the carbon quantification process for Richardson was relatively straightforward, I think, based on Brooks and Nina's experience, but also based on the availability of those UK carbon conversion factors, and they did a great job of it. But the big challenge is always the scope 3s, and it's always getting the information from suppliers to support those scope 3s. So I think Tushar mentioned the spend-based approach and the applicability of that versus the kind of line-by-line purchasing approach that can be taken to the carbon conversions. And the LCA software is a great move forward in that. But yeah, Richardson did a great job. I don't think I wasn't involved in the verification process for Richardson. It was one of my colleagues from start to finish. So I'm not 100% sure whether there were any big gaps, but inevitably, and I think Brooke will support this, the carbon number that a client such as Richardson presents us with at the start of the process is never the same as the carbon number that's agreed upon at the end of the process. So there's usually gaps that we encounter, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, that was going into my question. Sorry, did you have a comment there, Brooke?
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with Stephen.
I think that was kind of goes into the question that I was going to ask around. We've found that businesses who are looking to get onto the supply chain for NHS and for other government contracts as well, they'll have their carbon reduction plan, but because the early adopters had an element of the things that they could track. Their first report looked good. Their second report showed that there were improvements, but then the fourth, fifth, sixth report, because they've been doing it for so long and were early adopters, aren't actually looking as good because there's far more things that they can actually report on or that they're digging deeper into that they just didn't have the insight on in the first year. So they're actually they shot themselves in the foot by being so proactive initially, that actually they're starting to look worse because they're just adding more factors, like in trying to be transparent as possible. So how do you navigate that, do you think, Stephen, when someone said to you, oh, it's starting to look worse because you're making us report on more things? How do you sort of flip that narrative and be like, well, actually it's been this journey, and we are still trying to improve?
Yeah, we don't actually encounter that too frequently, and the reason is that the ISO standards provide the framework for calculating the carbon in year one, and then you repeat that same framework year on year. So you're always comparing apples with apples rather than apples with pears. However, there is circumstances do arise when something does change that's significant, perhaps in the company's operations or perhaps in the conversion factors or the quantification methodology, like the greenhouse gas protocol. And when these things change, the international standards require the baseline to be revised. So you actually go back and change the historical data to keep it in line with the current data so that you are making that like for like comparison year on year.
Fair enough. So there are quite a lot of questions coming in for you, Tushar, about the software. So I'm going to throw a couple of them at you now. First of all, would this work for a tech business, a software business looking to supply to the NHS? So how does it look into the green tech side of the supply chain?
Yeah, so right now our work involves like working with medical suppliers and the hospitals. So we are not right now looking at some sort of integration, if that the question is about. But eventually, what I'm understanding is that people want to have a real-time view of what happens, like let's say yesterday in a cardiology department, how much emissions we had. At that point, it would require the software to be integrated to some patient information system software where you can actually pull the information of what products were used inside the clinical pathway and then calculate emissions automatically.
So I think it might be more to do with not necessarily clinical, but even sort of back office processes, and using AI, for example, within just creating efficiencies in different types of back office tech. And if the system can be used to see if it's actually a greener version, because creating efficiency is always, you know, correlates with a more ecological view of systems, but actually using something as clunky as ChatGPT could then make it less efficient in terms of overall sustainability.
Rightly said, like in the back office, you have like SAP and other supply chain software, which could be used to find out like what products and services are being supplied to the hospital.
So there's someone else had asked, they're intrigued to know what independent database you're using to utilize to build the LCA. What would ratify the data that the company is declaring as their LCA?
Yeah, so on the LCA like publications, so first of, I think when we started Ecomedic, we started looking at all the LCA publications and started to build a database around it. But what we found out was like those LCAs required continuous updation because you would have some sort of a transportation system being changed or energy source being changed. So what we are now building is looking at like standard manufacturing processes for creating any product. And then we look at what is the energy input there. So by building the database in that format, you can always go back and change that. Now from hydraulic, we have moved to electric injection molding, and then you can quickly recalculate the LCAs very fast. So you have the most updated information to you.
Okay, great. I'm seeing if there's anything that would be specific to both of you guys, but I think there is something more just for you, Tisha, if you don't mind. For Ecomedic, who would ask the questions? It sounds like the user would need some knowledge of the LCA processes to go back to the manufacturer for information such as the methods of injection molding. So how much information do you need already to be able to use the platform?
Yeah, I mean, the approach we are having is let's make LCAs very scalable. And I think that the biggest challenge is like allowing everyone to use it. So right now, sustainability manager or let's say climate analyst is best equipped to use a software like this. But we are building something like where you could upload, let's say, engineering drawings from the suppliers, and it will automatically find the weight of the product. It will find the manufacturing process, and then it would start giving you answers automatically. But right now, you would need some knowledge around or some hand-holding from our side in terms of what questions to ask and how to build an LCA.
Okay. So I think any further questions on that, maybe if people can get in touch with you, or if there's like a free demo or something where people can sort of have play about and start putting some.
Yeah, so we have our product live, so you can actually go to our website, log in, and you can use it for free. You might be able to do a mini LCA at no cost, and I would love to hear the feedback that you might have. We're launching something like carbon reduction plan as well, so you just write like all the information and automatically builds the report for you. That would be available for free for forever. So anybody wants to build a CRP plan, they could just build that quickly.
Okay, awesome. Well, someone has asked what metrics and tracking mechanisms are essential for monitoring and evaluating the sustainability efforts within the NHS supply chain. Go back to you on that, Stephen. What metrics do you think are the ones that really stand out?
Well, I mean, we're focused on the carbon side of things here. So the wider sustainability efforts, obviously you've got the UN Sustainable Development Goals themselves, and each of those has got associated metrics with them, indicators and goals and objectives and targets, I think. So, measuring yourself against those standard indicators for wider sustainability efforts is it's always worth using the UN Sustainable Development Goals for those. But for carbon purposes, the absolute carbon figure and the absolute carbon reduction figure is obviously the key metric. Many of our clients will use science-based targets as well. So they've got a net zero target to work to, and they can use the science-based target profiles to monitor themselves against the progress towards that, towards net zero. And also many of our clients will use measures of output as a metric as well. So carbon per employee, carbon per £1 million turnover, carbon per square foot of manufacturing space, and so on. So there's lots of different intensity metrics that can be used. There's often the absolute carbon metric that's used for targeting as well. But most often the carbon targets are aligned with the science-based target towards net zero for whatever chosen year the particular company has targeted their own net zero achievements.
Well, there is a question here from Martin Thornton. It's not something that I knew, so I'm going to pass it over to both of you guys to see what you think. The claim carbon neutral or carbon neutrality is banned in the EU and will be in time in the UK. The Green Claims Code has classed this term as a greenwashing statement. Being carbon neutral is a man-made construct that nature doesn't recognise, so it is a term that should be avoided across organisations, as even the GHG protocols aren't 100% accurate. Do you think PAS and ISO accreditations should look to change the labelling on some of these statements going forwards? What do you think, Stephen? And what do you guys think, Brooke and Nina, about that, since you've now had your 2 years of carbon neutrality, and that might be something that you have to reword?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's based on, there's a couple of directives in the EU, the Empowering Consumers Directive and the Green Claims Directive, and they're aimed at clamping down on essentially greenwashing claims amongst companies. However, the ISO, so the PAS standard, the PAS 2060 carbon neutrality standard, that will be superseded in 2025 by the ISO standard, which is the international standard. And I sit in the technical committees for these, for some of these international standards. There's always lots and lots of debate around the terminology that's used. The ISO 14068, so the International Carbon Neutrality Standard, that was only published at the back end of 2023. So it's brand new at that point and likely won't be revised for another 10 years or so. So ISO have obviously chosen to continue to use the term itself. And I think it still remains a little unclear what the impact of the two directives and at EU level, and also the transition of those into well, not transition, but when something similar becomes UK law, what the impact of those will be as well. But for the minute, you know, it's still recognised that the international standards are the most credible and robust way to go about it with external verification, and the hierarchy. So there was an interesting change in the hierarchy for the new ISO 14068, the international standard, where you know, you must quantify your carbon, then reduce your carbon, then remove carbon. So it's looking at carbon removal credits through engineered solutions or through nature-based solutions before finally offsetting any further carbon. So it still remains the most credible and robust way of going about it. And I don't think it's yet quite clear whether the actual term itself will be banned or not, or reworded. But certainly in terms of the standard, ISO, which is international organisation, have chosen to continue to use it as of the end of 2023 there.
And the guys at Richardson, are you just going to take Stephen's lead on it, do you think? Did you know anything about this?
Yeah, I would say, like, from our perspective, as an SME, the PAS 2060 framework, which ultimately verifies you as carbon neutral, for us is more of a guide on how we can make substantial emissions reductions. So we're not just writing off all of our emissions, we're actually looking at the infrastructure and the processes of our companies and looking at ways that we can actually make tangible material change. So I suppose that's how we sort of operate within that framework.
Yeah. I didn't actually know that the term was classed as greenwashing. So I suppose it's good to know, but something that we can obviously look into as we look to report for our 3rd year.
Yeah, and I think you need to. Good is the enemy of great, right? You need to do something, and you can't be too afraid of you know, the greenwashing thing is quite powerful in terms of kind of cancelling people, but it's such a huge deterrent from people actually really trying to celebrate what they're doing. So I think, you know, as long as you do have the stats to back yourselves up, and you are trying to make a difference year on year of what you're doing, and you're doing it from the top, you know, you're not just doing it from the bottom line in terms of you know, offsetting. You are doing it from the very top and trying not to use as much carbon from the very outset of activities. Then there's always going to be a leg for you to stand on. You know, the terminology might change, but your efforts are always going to be, you know, the same if you feel like you're doing the right thing. There are still questions coming in. I do only have 5 minutes left, and I'm going to have to go over some of the stuff that we have going on today. So any more questions that everyone has, we will have the full recording of this webinar and all of the slides and a write-up on our blog coming up this week, and you will get a link sent to you on your email if you've signed up to this session, and it will be going out on our social media as well. Any other questions that you do have for either of our speakers today, I think that if you're happy to put your contact details in the chat right now, guys, feel free to do that, and people can get back in touch with you. There's still quite a lot on the EcoMedic thing, and I think that maybe it might be best if people just go and have a look at the tool themselves, and maybe have a play around and see what you can and can't do on there, because I think it might be one of those rabbit hole situations that we get into where everyone's asking questions about every last thing, and I think that we're better off people just maybe having a look and trying out for themselves. So my team are going to share the links to the other webinars that we have coming up today as part of the Sustainability Day of Action. So at lunchtime, we have our event all around nutrition, and this one always gets quite a few. I don't know if it's because we put it at lunchtime, but it always gets quite a few sign-ups. That's 12 till 1 p.m. today, and it's about serving up sustainable food alternatives. So all about nutrition and what happens within the supply chain around what we do with food within the NHS. And then finally at 4 p.m, 4 till 5, we're going to have a session on building communication strategies for a sustainable NHS. So we've already touched upon the inaccessibility of some of the terminology, particularly around sustainability and ecology. And we want sustainability to be everyone's job in and out of the NHS. So this session is really key to anyone who is interested in making sure that it's a completely inclusive world around sustainability in healthcare. What I also wanted to raise as well is the fact that we have, I didn't know if, oh yeah, my team have put those links in there. Let me know if you don't have any, if you're not able to click on those links to sign up, because people have said that they're not able to click links in the chat for some reason. They are on our website as well, all they're free to sign up to today. We also have our brand new Sustainable Suppliers Index. So this is new this week. We have been running sustainability partnerships for the last 3 years, and we've had so many amazing companies come and speak on our webinars. We have at least one a month. One webinar a month, and we have a load of great stories. And our primary objective as sustainability partnerships is to link up sustainable procurement people within the NHS with sustainable alternatives. That's been the core to our mission from day one, and we have now just set up what is a directory of businesses who have sustainable alternatives that can get into the supply chain on the NHS. So the mission there is to have an index specifically of sustainable suppliers. You can go onto that page now. My team has just posted the link there. It's a self-service platform. There is some QC involved to ensure that we have the right companies on there, but it's completely self-service. You set yourself up a little profile, and that allows for sustainable those within the NHS who are interested in procuring a little bit more sustainably to then get in touch with those businesses without having to come through us or to watch one of the webinars or any of those kind of things. Okay, so people are saying that they can't click on the link. Are other people able to click on the links that we're sharing in the chat? It seems to work for me, but it might be that I'm the owner, so it's okay. Are any of my speakers able to click on them? Oh, everyone else says it's working, so it may be an issue.
Yeah, it
with
works for me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe.
it works for us as well.
Okay, thanks everyone. It might just be Zoom on a certain, people are able to at least copy and paste it. Yeah. Great tip. Thank you, Catherine. If you're in the web version of Zoom, you have to copy and paste the links. If you have the Zoom app, you can click the links. That's a good tip. I've been using Zoom for the last 4 years, and it's the first time that I've realized that. So I appreciate that. All right, great. So that's us finishing for today. Like I said, if you do have any more questions for our speakers, please, they have actually sent their information above. So please do get back in touch with them, carry the conversation on. We will be here twice again today for the rest of our Sustainability Day of Action events. So it just goes to thank everyone for coming to the first, you guys were here at 10. So I appreciate everyone coming to the earlier one. Thank you so much to Brooke and Nina for your guys' case study there, backing up everything that we got from Stephen, who's clearly very well versed on all things ISO, and when someone's well versed on sustainability stuff when they have all the acronyms down, especially NHS stuff, right? It's all Stephen's got them all lined up in his brain, so that he's well on that. And thank you so much to Tusha. I'm excited for everyone to start using the EcoMedic platform as well, and seeing what we can get out of that with the full story around sustainability in terms of medical devices and new and interesting materials as well. I bet you get to see a lot of interesting new and novel materials, so looking forward to seeing them as well.
Thanks so much, Georgie.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have
Thanks,
a great
everybody.
day, and hopefully see you back here at 12.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.